When Keanu Reeves walks onto the late-night stage just days after the death of Pope Francis, the audience expects something simple. A gentle interview, quiet reflections, maybe a story or two about a film in the works. But something's off from the start. The host tries to steer the night toward laughs, but Keanu isn't following the script. He's distant, focused. And then his eyes lock onto something unexpected. A small golden rosary, placed silently on the table before him. That's when the atmosphere changes. The questions shift. So do the answers. What begins as a casual segment spirals into something else entirely. A live revelation, an unspoken confession, and a truth that's been hiding in silence for years. By the time the final words are spoken, the audience isn't clapping. They're witnessing. Keanu Reeves breaks years of silence on live TV after secret Vatican encounter. And what he shares may change everything we think we know about faith, power, and prophecy. Oh, and before we continue, tell us what's the one thing you love most about Keanu Reeves. Let us know in the comments. The studio lights flickered briefly before settling. The LED glow from the cameras reflected on the eager faces of the audience, who were buzzing with anticipation for tonight's special guest. On any other evening, this would be just another late-night talk show. Casual jokes about celebrities, Hollywood gossip, behind-the-scenes laughs. But tonight felt different. And not just because the world was still processing the death of Pope Francis. The host, all charm and polished smile, projected his voice to the room. Ladies and gentlemen, Keanu Reeves. Thunderous applause. A few audience members stood up. Some discreetly raised their phones to record, even though it was against studio policy. He entered with slow, silent steps, dressed in a black suit, no tie. His hair slightly longer than usual. His expression, courteous but distant. The host extended a hand and Keanu shook it gently. They sat across from each other as expected. On the table between them, a glass of water, a few cue cards, and, curiously, a small golden rosary resting on a cushion of deep blue velvet. So, Keanu, the host began, keeping the mood light. What a time, huh? The Pope has passed and you still look immortal. What's your secret? Holy water? Laughter from the audience. But Keanu only gave a faint smile, saying nothing. His gaze fell on the rosary, not a passing glance. He saw it and paused. The silence, initially awkward, began to feel heavier. The audience noticed the shift and slowly quieted. Everything okay? The host asked with a forced chuckle. You're even more zen than usual tonight. Keanu took a deep breath. He reached out, touching the rosary lightly with his fingertips. His eyes drifted, unfocused for a moment, as if diving into a memory, long buried. He told me something that night in Rome, he said at last. His voice was calm but low, almost like he was talking to himself. Something no one has ever heard. The host leaned forward slightly, intrigued. The audience was dead silent. But maybe today I need to tell it. The studio froze for a beat. People weren't sure if this was part of a scripted moment, maybe a clever promotional twist for a film. But Keanu wasn't acting. There was no trace of performance in his face. Tell what? The host asked, trying to regain control. Keanu looked at him, but at the same time he was looking through him. What Pope Francis entrusted to me. What he didn't want to die with him. The audience remained silent. The host exchanged a nervous glance with the crew off camera, but no voice came through the earpiece. Keanu wasn't here to promote a film. He wasn't here to entertain. Years ago, he began, his voice soft but steady. I received an invitation that didn't feel real. Keanu adjusted in his seat, the rosary still resting on the table in front of him. I was in Florence filming. Something small. Something personal. A European production. One night at the hotel, a man knocked on my door. He didn't say his name. He just handed me an envelope sealed with the Vatican's insignia. The audience held their breath. Inside was an invitation, not official, not diplomatic. It was personal, handwritten, from Pope Francis himself. The host raised his eyebrows, clearly surprised. What did it say? Keanu stared into the distance as if rereading the letter in his mind. It said, "I would like to walk with you in silence among the olive trees." That was it. No cameras, no press. Just that. The room was still. The tone had shifted into something near sacred, almost liturgical. "And you went?" the host asked, barely above a whisper. Keanu nodded. "Of course I went. I thought maybe he knew something. Or maybe he wanted to ask for institutional help, a donation, something like that. I didn't know. But what I found was far beyond that." He paused. A heavy silence filled the studio. "I was taken by a simple car to a side entrance of the Vatican. The night was cold. A Monsignor was waiting. We walked through a maze of corridors. And then, we emerged into a garden. There, under an old tree, he was waiting for me." Keanu paused again, then continued. "The Pope looked tired, very thin. But his eyes were more alive than anything I've ever seen." The host stayed quiet, listening intently. So did the audience, completely entranced. He started talking right away, said he had seen a video, footage of me visiting a children's hospital anonymously. He said that gesture of silence spoke louder than any sermon. And then, Keanu took a breath. He confessed. Said he felt that God had been silent with him for years. The words dropped like stone in the studio. A collective chill ran through the room. He spoke about the burden of Peter's chair, the pain of representing something larger than yourself, but feeling utterly alone. He said he prayed, but the heavens felt mute. Keanu now looked directly at the audience. There was urgency in his eyes, a weight. "Faith survives silence," he told me, "but I fear that one day, it may begin to imitate it." "And what did you say?" the host asked, more subdued than ever. "Nothing. I didn't say a word. I just listened. And then..." He pulled an envelope from his pocket. It was sealed with red wax. And he said to me. Keanu straightened, repeating the words exactly as they had been told to him. "If I don't see you again, this secret must live." Cliffhanger. The words rang out like an invisible bell. "Did you open the envelope that night?" the host asked, tension rising. Keanu shook his head. "No, I kept it for years. But now, with him gone, I don't know if I can stay silent any longer." The studio was so quiet. It was as if time itself had paused. Even the usual soft hum of stage equipment seemed to fade. The host sat frozen, barely breathing. Keanu leaned forward, eyes locked on the small golden rosary. "I kept the envelope. Hidden for years," he said. "It traveled with me. Through every film set, every hotel room. I never opened it. I told myself it wasn't my place." He looked up. "But when I heard he had died, something changed." He reached inside his jacket slowly. With the care of someone handling something sacred, Keanu pulled out an envelope. Yellowed with age, its wax seal still intact. Deep crimson stamped with the papal crest. The audience stirred subtly. Tension pressed in like gravity. "You're going to open it now?" the host asked, voice tight. Keanu didn't respond. Instead, he held up the envelope to the cameras. Then wordlessly he broke the seal. The sound, soft but deliberate, felt louder than anything else in that moment. He unfolded the letter. His hands were steady. He began to read. "To the man of silence who listens more than he speaks and sees more than he shows." The host turned to face him. The audience leaned forward as if drawn by a magnet. "This world does not need more saints in gold. Keanu continued reading. It needs men who will carry light through the shadows cast by those who were supposed to protect it. The paper trembled slightly in his hands, not from fear, but from reverence. I write this with a heart torn between duty and despair. For years I fought behind marble walls. I wore the crown of a fisherman while swimming in a sea of secrets. Keanu paused, swallowing hard. There are forces inside this church that I could never cleanse. They wear crosses on their chests, but move like wolves. I tried to expose them. I failed. The host opened his mouth as if to interject, but then thought better of it. Keanu continued. And now, if my voice is silenced, I ask you, an outsider, untouched by the politics of my world, to carry this truth, not to destroy, but to preserve, a beat. And at the end of the letter, Keanu said, looking up from the page, there was something else. He unfolded a second sheet. His eyes narrowed slightly. His voice dropped almost to a whisper. It was a vision, a prophecy, the audience murmured. The host leaned forward. The Pope wrote. Keanu took a breath. He wrote, the one who will undo me shall not come from within. He will smile, he will dress as a friend, but he will carry the void. Gasps echoed through the room. The host blinked, stunned. He believed, Keanu said slowly, that the collapse of faith would not come from heresy, but from imitation, from someone who seemed pure, but brought nothingness. The silence that followed was absolute. I didn't understand it then, Keanu added, but after that letter everything changed. What do you mean? The host asked. Keanu met his gaze. I started studying quietly. Faith, power, silence. I spoke to no one. I wanted to understand what he meant. A pause. And that's when they started coming. Who? Keanu looked directly into the camera now. Letters. Anonymous. Warning me. All connected to him. All telling me never to reveal what I know. Keanu held the second sheet from the envelope with both hands, the weight of it far heavier than the paper itself. He looked up again, eyes scanning the studio, then turned slightly toward the audience. This part, I've never read out loud before. Not to anyone. Even the crew behind the camera stood still, caught in the same spell that had fallen over the room. He read, the one who will undo me shall not come from within. He will smile. He will dress as a friend. But he will carry the void. A murmur moved through the studio like wind through dry leaves. The host sat still, as if afraid that even a breath might break the spell. Keanu folded the letter slowly and placed it on the table, beside the rosary. He believed that someone outside the church, would rise, not as an enemy, but as a mirror, empty, and that this person would gain power through charm, through imitation of goodness, and then hollow everything out from the inside. The host broke the silence finally. He thought this was already happening. Keanu nodded slowly. He told me, the world's faith is no longer crumbling from truth. It's starving from illusion. The host looked uncomfortable now. He shifted in his seat, glancing to the side, perhaps hoping the producer would cut to commercial. But there was no signal. No one dared to interrupt. He also said, Keanu continued, that the next great step of the church might not be taken by the church itself. The words hung in the air, unsettling and prophetic. You mean, someone else would carry forward its mission? Keanu didn't answer immediately. He looked back at the rosary again. He believed faith had to evolve, he said, but he was terrified it would be manipulated before it could. The audience was silent. No one coughed, no one shifted. It wasn't just interest now. It was a shared gravity, a sense that something irreversible was being spoken aloud. The host tried again to shift the tone. You're talking about big ideas here, Keanu. Theology, power, prophecy. Maybe we should take a breath. No. Keanu's voice cut through the air. Not loud, but final. This isn't a story. It's a warning. And there's more. The host leaned back, unsure of what to say. Keanu continued, his voice calm but unwavering. After that meeting in the Vatican, I returned home. I didn't speak about it. I didn't even tell my closest friends, but then, a year later, I received a letter. No return address. No signature. He reached into a folder beside him and unfolded a piece of paper. Aged, but not as old as the one from the Vatican. He read from it. Do not open the envelope. There are forces watching. He was surrounded. You are not. Stay in the shadows. The silence protects more than you imagine. The host leaned forward again, tension rising. That's threatening. Keanu nodded. That was the first. I received 6 more over the next 4 years. All from different places. All in different handwriting. But every one of them warned me not to share what I knew. Did you think they were from inside the church? At first, yes, but over time I began to connect things. He set down the letter and continued. The deaths of reformist priests, journalists who vanished while investigating Vatican finances, marginal notes found in old Bibles in locked archives, patterns, warnings. The host opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again. I came across a name, Keanu said. A phrase, really. It was written in Latin but repeated across several documents. He looked directly into the camera. Sine nomine. The words sent a ripple through the audience. No one knew what it meant, but somehow it felt dangerous. It means without name, Keanu explained. It's not an organization, it's not a group, it's a belief, a quiet hidden network formed by those who no longer trust the church, but still believe in God. The host whispered. And you think the Pope trusted them? Keanu shook his head. No. He feared them. But he knew they might be necessary, because he knew the church, as it was, might not survive what was coming. Another silence. And then Keanu said something that shifted everything. And that's when I realized the Pope didn't choose me by chance. The host stared at him. What do you mean? Keanu's eyes darkened, not with fear, but with memory. He saw something in me, something I didn't see, not until the dream. Keanu's eyes lingered on the audience for a moment longer before he leaned forward. He picked up a different sheet of paper from the folder. This one, worn but more recent. The host stayed silent, sensing that the room had entered territory beyond performance. This arrived a few weeks before the Pope died, Keanu said quietly. There was no sender, just a folded note slipped under my hotel room door. He held it up. No official seal, no signature. Just a typewritten message on yellowing paper. He read, "He is surrounded. If you open the envelope, there will be consequences. Silence protects more than you know." The audience stirred. The host blinked hard, visibly shaken. I didn't know what to make of it. But then the letters kept coming. All different, all urgent. And they all said the same thing in different ways. Stay quiet. Did you ever try to find out who sent them? The host asked. Keanu nodded. I tried. Private investigators, contacts in Europe. Nothing. No fingerprints. No CCTV footage. Whoever sent these, they knew what they were doing. He pulled out a thin folder and opened it. Inside were newspaper clippings, scribbled notes, photographs. He laid a few of them on the table. At first I thought I was imagining connections. You know how paranoia works? You start seeing patterns where there are none. But then, he picked up a photo. It was of a smiling priest, young, full of life. This man was Father Matteo. He led youth programs in Palermo. He was outspoken about corruption in church finances. He disappeared on his way to Rome. Another clipping. A headline in Italian. Journalist found dead in Tiber River. She was investigating real estate ties between the Vatican and shadow companies in South America. They ruled it a suicide. But she just published an expose 2 days earlier. The host was visibly unsettled now. Keanu, this is a lot to process. But Keanu pressed on. Then I found notes hidden inside old Bibles. Not online. Not catalogued. Handwritten. Sometimes in Latin. Sometimes in symbols. He slid one of them across the table. On it, a crude sketch of an eye. And beneath it, 3 words, sine nomine, vivit. Without name, lives, Keanu translated. Over and over, in texts on margins, always buried deep inside forgotten copies of scripture. The host reached for his glass of water but didn't drink. The audience was completely still. And then, Keanu said, I realized something even more disturbing. He paused, voice low now. The Pope didn't just see something in me. He saw someone like them. Someone who moves in silence. Someone the world doesn't expect to carry something sacred. He closed the folder and looked at the host. He chose me not despite the fact that I'm not part of the church, but because of it. The host was silent, absorbing everything. Then cautiously he asked, but why you? Keanu leaned back, eyes clouded with memory. Because of what came after. The dream. The host furrowed his brow. The one you mentioned before. Keanu nodded slowly. Yeah. The night I opened the envelope, I had a dream. Or maybe it was something more. He looked into the audience again. I was in a massive, abandoned basilica. Everything was covered in dust. No candles. No prayers. Just silence. A shiver passed through the audience. And at the altar, Keanu said, he was there, Pope Francis, standing, waiting, and he spoke. The host whispered. What did he say? Keanu closed his eyes for a second, then opened them. You thought you were only an actor, he said. But I saw the man who carries silence with dignity. The audience seemed to exhale as one, a shared gasp that came not from fear, but awe. I woke up, Keanu said, shaking, sweating. I'd never felt anything like it. Since that night, I haven't been the same. The host stared at him. Do you think he knew he was going to die? Keanu didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was quiet. He wasn't afraid of death. He was afraid of dying. For nothing. The weight of the words crushed the air. Keanu turned back to the table. Slowly, deliberately, he pulled something else from the folder. And that's why, tonight, live in front of everyone. I'm going to show you something that was never meant to be seen. A slow hush rolled through the studio. The host didn't speak. The audience didn't move. Something had changed. Keanu Reeves wasn't just a guest anymore. He was a vessel for something deeper. He took a deep breath, then began. The dream wasn't like anything I'd experienced before. It didn't feel like imagination. It felt placed, delivered. Rested both hands on the table. I was in an enormous church. Empty. The kind of silence that hums in your chest. Dust drifted in the light. Every footstep echoed like thunder. I didn't know where I was, but it felt sacred and abandoned. He paused, his voice steady but soft. At the altar, he was waiting. Pope Francis. But not like before. He wasn't sick. He was calm, almost glowing. The host leaned in, drawn completely in. What did he say? Keanu looked out toward the audience as if addressing each of them individually. He said, You thought you would only play a man of conviction, but you are always more. You carry silence like a mantle. You carry it with dignity. He paused. He told me the church was drowning in its own echo, that the voice of God had been buried beneath centuries of noise, that only someone who understands the value of silence could hear it again. The host swallowed hard. Do you believe it was really him? I don't know what to believe, Keanu admitted, but it changed me. Since then, I've stopped working as much. I started reading scripture, theology, mysticism, even apocryphal texts. I've been trying to understand what he wanted me to do. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, worn notebook. I started writing. Every night. Thoughts, symbols, questions. Sometimes I feel like I'm not the one writing. The host was visibly shaken now. Keanu, are you afraid? Keanu paused before answering. I was. For a long time. But now I think maybe the fear was just the first test. He turned back to the rosary on the table. You know, the Pope told me something else in the dream. Just before it ended, the host waited. Your silence will be a door, he said. But you must decide if you'll let others walk through it, or keep it locked forever. A long pause. The host looked around, clearly overwhelmed. This is not what I expected when you sat down tonight. Keanu smiled for the first time in minutes, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was tired, worn. It's not what I expected when I walked into the Vatican either. So why now? The host asked. Why tell all of this here, on live television? Keanu looked straight into the camera. Because truth is quieter than lies. And if I don't say this now, I might never get another chance. He leaned back slightly. And because there's something I need to show you. The host hesitated. Is it dangerous? Maybe, Keanu said. But what scares me more is what happens if I don't show it. He reached into the folder one more time, pulling something small and rectangular from between the papers. His fingers trembled, not with fear, but with the weight of inevitability. The host leaned in. What is it? Keanu held it up, face down, still hidden. It's a photograph. From that night in the Vatican. A private moment that someone else captured. The audience was utterly still. Every breath felt suspended in the room. Me, the Pope. In the garden. He flipped the photo over. But there's something else in it. The host's voice cracked. What? Keanu looked down at the image. A figure, a hooded one, in the background, just barely visible. He placed the photograph on the table face up, but didn't turn it toward the camera. Not yet. This figure. It appears in 3 other images I've received over the years. Always watching. Always hidden. The host whispered. Who is it? Keanu looked up. I don't know. A long beat. But the Pope warned me in the dream. You'll see the shadow before you see the light. Keanu placed a photo on the table, angled away from the cameras. Only the host could see it. It's me and the Pope, Keanu said. Taken the night we walked in the garden. I didn't know it existed until it arrived anonymously years later. He pointed to the corner. Look closely behind the trees, a hooded figure, just watching. The host squinted, unsettled. Could be anyone. Maybe. But the same figure appears in 3 other photos sent to me over the years. Always different places, always distant, always watching. Keanu laid the others out, blocking the cameras from capturing too much. The Pope's last words to me were, you will see the shadow before you see the light. The host fell silent. It's not a threat, Keanu added. It's a warning. Something's coming. And it won't be the church that faces it. It'll be us. He stood to leave. Faith isn't gone. It's waiting. And silence doesn't mean peace. Sometimes it's the beginning of war. At the curtain, he turned back. And if you think this ends here, a pause. Wait, because what came after this and was worse.